So I want to talk about BIM and the fear of BIM. A lot of people mention Revit and that it's not BIM and that it ties into the BIM process, and that is true. That it is a tool within the BIM suite of tools, but when you hear that Revit isn't going to get you all this benefit, naturally you may feel a little bit of fear, thinking that now you have to go out there and purchase an entire suite of other tools to achieve all these different things. But in fact, Revit does a lot of those things already. It's just that some of the other tools do them better. And really what BIM is taking these models, the information, and then leveraging that in different facets of the building's life cycle. So through FM or through lighting analysis and some of these other things, and within just one interface we can access a lot of those tools without having to go out there and purchase 3D Max, Navisworks, or Inkscape. So if we take a look, I've got Revit open 2019, and I've just opened up the sample project because this has a lot of the stuff already in there, so we can easily kind of go through it and talk about it, and you guys should have access to this as well. If you don't, you can check out their site. They have all these models up there. I'll post the link below so you can take a look for yourself if you can't find it. So the first bit is that we can actually model everything in here. So we'll model our buildings, our doors, all the assets are looked at as that way within this environment. They're not lines and circles. They're actual elements that represent something, and we can tie in data that we can then represent through schedules or quantities. So we can do quantity takeoff, which is something that you may use a symbol for, or you may use Navisworks. So we can come over to the project browser and we can actually drill down into it, and we can see we've got some template schedules already built. We can actually create some new ones by doing that. I'm going to close this. By doing that, we get an option to pick a category. So for example, if we care about air terminals, we can press OK. Then we'll get this one, available fields. And what this is saying is everything that's all the parameters that kind of tie into it. We also get up here, select available fields from. But on here we get all the available parameters that are associated with it. We can get manufacturer information, cost information, and then we can do an entire quantity takeoff list of everything that's involved with this project. For example, if I open up this door schedule, we have the door number, width, height, hardware group, and if we have cost available, we can tie that in here as well. And then we can start doing quantity takeoff and not have to go out there and purchase Navisworks. So I'll close this. Again, this is going to be more of a high overview of all these different things so that you can start messing with them yourself without thinking you need to go out there and purchase software. Kind of to show you, hey, capabilities are here in Revit. So if we jump over here to the Analyze tab, we can take a look over here at Energy Optimization, and we get a number of options, and we can generate energy analytic models, and this is gonna, all these tools are gonna upload things to the cloud, so we can tie directly into Revit these assets, get them up there, and then we can start looking at different things like lighting analysis, solar, trying to optimize our building materials, and all from the Revit interface. It's not free. You do have to pay for it depending on what you're trying to do. If you're just uploading it, you can get a lot of information from there, but if you're doing a lighting analysis, you may have to pay for that depending on what you're trying to run on it. And you just pay with your cloud credits. It's not a subscription model. You don't have to keep paying for something you're not using every day. So you do have those options. If we take a look at our I think it's our Collaborate tab, we do have options to do collaboration on the model. So we can, instead of sharing our model, for example, like AutoCAD, sharing them and then trying to integrate everything, we can do it all in one place. But what's really cool is, for example, a lot of people do clash detection. You can actually do that within Revit. It's interference check, and it's on the Collaborate tab, or the Collaborate ribbon, or the tab, and then the coordinate panel, and then we have an interference check button. We can run an interference, and we'll just select the two different items, or we can select multiple items that'll clash with another category over here. Then we press OK, and then it's gonna go through and it's checking for all the interferences, and then it'll bump that out, and then we can start looking at that stuff. So we can come in here, we can then select them, and then we can say show. See if we can. So we can look here. If we drill down into an item, we can select that, and it'll highlight in here. You may see if you select some things, you may not see them. It's really just kind of getting in the environment and then moving your views around so that you can see the different elements. Again, it's not as intuitive as some of the other softwares out there. After you do this, though, try to group everything. You can then export it out. So we'll close that. So again, this gives you an option to do clash detection without going out there and purchasing a tool like Navisworks and then learning that on top of Revit. So if we jump into view, we also have options to render in cloud. Render in cloud is kind of like the Insight tie-in with the energy in the Analyze tab and the energy optimization. If we render in cloud, we'll upload, and then it'll just do all its computing using their servers, and then you pay based off of the settings that you apply. You pay. They do have a drafting setting so that you can just do a whole bunch for free to kind of get your concept down, and then you can do a kind of a higher quality image. And generally, it ranges between 0 to 50 or more cloud credits, so it doesn't get too bad when you compare to the fact if you're rendering on your computer, it's holding up your architects or whoever. So it's really kind of balancing whatever that is. But you do have a direct tie-in to do your renders without having to use a tool such as Navis or 3D Max. So on the same tab, we can actually drop down our view and we can do walkthroughs. So if you're familiar with a lot of other tools like Inkscape, Navisworks, you can do animations. Well, you can do that within Revit's environment as well. So if I close this, in the sample file that you get, you should have in the project browser a walkthrough. And if we select that, we'll get the image where it was left off in the animation. And if we right click, show camera, edit walkthrough, we then can play that animation that's in there. Generally, your walkthrough, you'll kind of lay it out. So if we jump into a floor plan, you can see the points that it's pretty much the path that camera is going to follow. So this tool isn't as intuitive, and you can go up in elevation. That's kind of difficult, but after you kind of get something lined out, you then can export it. So we go to export, we can drill down here, and we can see our images and animations, and we can click walkthrough. We'll do that while we're actually in the animation. So if I do that again, walkthrough, we'll just get some settings that we can modify, and from here we can export out a pretty good image, and we can change the way that it's going to come out, if it's going to look like this or rendered or whatever it is, and that also may change how long it's really computing. There's no, from what I can tell, there's no option to pull our animations into the cloud. I don't know if that's something they're working on, so it's all on your computer, so it depends on what you're trying to do. And it's also computing a lot of stuff because it's looking at all your elements, and it does have some difficulties moving through there, but the export looks pretty decent. It's just time-wise, it takes a little bit longer. So we've looked at that. We also have drafting view capabilities, so if you're using AutoCAD and whatnot, you can actually get into this and use the drafting capabilities within there. So another thing, speaking of AutoCAD, is if we come over to our user interface, we can check our keyboard shortcuts. You can actually modify these quite a bit. So if you see, I've modified the modify one. I've actually added another shortcut. You can add shortcuts that have more than 2 letters to them, and if you do that, for example, and you can also apply the same shortcut for multiple things. So if I come here and I just do MD assign, we can have it assigned to the exact same thing. If I press OK, when I do the MD command, you'll see down at the bottom, right now it's gonna, if I press space, it'll operate the create one, but if I use my arrow keys, I can actually kind of go through the list of all the elements that have that shortcut applied to them. If I go back to our keyboard shortcuts, you can do more than 1 letter or more than 2 letters. I think you can go up to 5, and so you can have a pretty intuitive list, such as AutoCAD. When you're kind of typing out commands, you can do something like that within the Revit environment as well. So, and one more quick thing I'd like to show you is if we jump into our Insert tab, we can take a look at all the different things that we can actually import into AutoCAD or into Revit. So we can do linked CAD, IFC, we can import CAD. We can also do a coordination model. So generally, if you're working with a contractor, you may be familiar with NWDs or Navis models. You can actually add those into your Revit environment. So if we click add, we can select an NWD or an NWC. So generally, an NWD is going to be a compiled Navis model of all the disciplines involved in that project. You could easily ask, from the contractor for NWCs of all the disciplines, because they generally have those before they compile the full NWD. And then you can individually link your NWCs, or you can just do a full NWD. You are limited to what you can do. So when you load that in, press cancel, you will get in the visibility graphics another tab that gives you options to apply some type of parameter to it, or visibility parameter. So saying, not to show up in these templates or whatever the case is. And your only override is the transparency. So there's not too much you can do with that, but you can hide it and move it around and do what you will. But that gives you an option to not have to go out and purchase Navisworks or another tool. You can integrate your coordination model within the Revit interface, and then work with your models that way, coordinating with other people's, just all there in your environment or your Revit environment. So the idea behind this is to show that you can do a number of processes: quantity takeoff, rendering, coordination models, animations. You can do all that within Revit, and I wouldn't get too bogged down with all the other tools out there. First getting familiar with Revit, and then if you do need to do Clash, get into doing some within Revit's environment. If you find that it doesn't work too well and you're learning, the whole concept behind it, then move to maybe a tool like Navisworks, integrate that into your workflow, because it's going to transition pretty easily, because the interface between Navisworks and Revit is kind of the same. So focus on learning Revit's tools, leverage the tools that it has within it, and then I think you're on your way to really getting into the whole BIM process without, going out there and touching every single thing that BIM has to offer. So hopefully this video helped you out. I hope it does, and please let me know if you are getting into BIM. Let me know if you have any questions, and I really do appreciate you watching. Thanks a lot.